Hi everybody, this is TimeTravelBeard, and this is episode 2 of how to make Minecraft shaders. Today we're going to do what is where and why it's there. A lot of this information is on the Optifine documentation, which is here, and that link will be in the description. And you can always read this stuff ahead to kind of get a grasp of things. But we're going to go through it and kind of try to do it in a way that's still interactive and fun. And let's get to it. So I made a little bit of an outline. We're going to start with version control. Where is the version that worked? One of the problems with making shaders is that since we are having to save our stuff in Notepad every time we reload it, it's easy to lose the last version that worked, and that sucks. So let's go in here and we're going to go to our shader packs folder. We're going to take our shader we're working on, right click and copy, and right click and paste. And then we're going to rename this tutorial 2. And this is what we're going to work in today. So if you're in Notepad+, you could do File, Close All, and it'll close everything off, and we're going to start fresh. It might be easier, instead of going in it from here, we can come back in here to the shader folder, tutorial 2, shaders, and here's our stuff. We're kind of going to go through what a lot of these do today. So to kind of explain it, I'm going to draw us a picture. We now know where our last working shader is. It was a tutorial 1. So let's look at all of this stuff and what it does. I'm going to draw some pictures, kind of make it make sense. I might have lost my thing. Oh, here it is. Okay, so like we said before, we've got different pages that we can draw to that are called texture buffers or color attachments. The pipeline, or the way that shaders work, is that it does things in a certain order. The first thing it draws is shadows, and it draws those to its own page. They're just going to be there on their page doing what they do. That's what it does first. So it draws shadows. So here's a little person. They've got a shadow. That's not how it works, but we'll just go with that for now. That's its own thing. So let's forget about that. What it does next is, by default, is it draws everything to one page. And we can change that later and do deferred rendering, but we don't need to worry about that now. So we've got another page. We're going to call this color text 0. It's the main default one. And what it does is it's going to draw everything on there, and it's going to do it in an order that makes sense. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to draw sky. And then the next thing it's going to do is it's going to draw the sun and the moon. And this is just how we would do it. Here we go. There's our sun. We've got to put the little rays on here, because we'll do ray tracing eventually, so let's put some rays. Next, what would we draw? We're starting from the back and working our way forward. So let's do some clouds. Here's some nice little clouds. And then next we might draw all the ground and everything. So let's draw all the, here's the ground. It's like a hill. And then the last thing we're going to draw, and while we draw ground, let's draw other solid things. So let's draw like, here's a person. I used to be an artist, and I was kind of good at it, but it's kind of hard to draw with a trackpad. Let's also add a sheep, a nice fluffy sheep. And then last, we're going to draw things that are transparent, because if we just draw those after we draw everything else, that's a nice easy way to do it. I'm not even sure which thing does that here, but let's go for it. Let's put a bunch of water. Nope, it's not transparent. Just pretend it is. There we go. That was kind of transparent. And that's the order that it's going to draw things in. Somewhere in there it also draws rain, and a few other things. But that's the basic gist, is we're going in an order that kind of makes sense. Make sure I'm still recording, because it would suck to do this and not have this recorded. So we're going to avoid this for today, and we're going to look at this stuff. So let's go through these files and see what some of them do. And we'll do it interactively. So the shadow stuff is here, so we're not going to worry about that today. We already did the shader thing where we could do menus. Let's look at the sky. The sky and all these things that draw actual objects in the world instead of the composite, which was the full screen pass. Start with gbuffers. So let's look for sky. Sky is going to be sky basic. And then there's sky textured, which is the sun and moon. And then the weather and stuff is different. But let's open up sky basic. We're not going to do the vertex shader. We're going to do the fragment shader, because we don't need to worry about vertex shaders yet. And some of this should look familiar. We've got version 120. The uniforms are things that are information from Minecraft that we're dealing with. And it looks like there's other stuff here we're not used to. Here's a varying. Here's a variable. Here's a function. Remember, we can tell because it starts out before main, and it's got its little parentheses and it's got its brackets. Here's another function. Then here's our void main. So let's look at this. There's already stuff going on here in this tutorial, but this part should look familiar. We've got a variable called color. It's a vector with 3 components. There's something going on here with an if. We haven't messed with those yet, so we'll talk about those. And then here we've got the stuff that says where we're drawing to page 0, and we're going to turn it to color and 1 again, just like we did with composite. So if we look at the beginning here, one thing it's doing new is this if stuff. There's an if and there's an else, and there's more brackets. We haven't seen brackets before outside of a function. So this is kind of curious. What it's doing is it's saying that if whatever's in these parentheses, and then it opens brackets, which I like to kind of do them down like this. We'll do this. And then this is inside of those brackets. And then there's an else. So when this bracket closes, there's an else that opens up this other set of brackets, and there's stuff in here. So if star data.a, so again, what is star data? It looks like it's a variable. It's a vec4, which is a varying, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it does some stuff. Like we don't know where it's getting its stuff from, it doesn't look like. So that's kind of curious. How do we know that the a is above 0.5? Well, varyings are actually something that's passed from the vertex shader, which goes before the fragment shader, and then it gives the data to the fragment shader. We don't need to worry about that right now, so we're not going to mess with stars. We're just here to know that this is where the sky is. So just for fun, to make sure that this works, we're going to take our color, and let's say color equals, actually let's say 0. So again, it's a vec3 because it's got 3 components, and we're going to set them all to 0 because 0 is black. And this should make us a black sky. So let's save this. We've already got Minecraft open. I'm going to hit R to refresh. Oh, I'm still on our old shader. Let's get in our shader list and a tutorial 2 and apply it. And look at that. So we're going to use this to kind of do like a horror theme, maybe, or like a spooky theme as we go through. That way, what we're doing is still kind of has a purpose. I think we also might want to change that our default green amount is 0.25 because not everybody wants to play with green. So let's try to think where we did that. We were doing that in composite, and we've got these here. Now that's something we might forget later. But here, let's set our default to 0, save it, and that's done. But there's so many things in so many places that it's easy to forget that this is here. It's easy to forget that a lot of things are in a lot of places. So while we're learning where Optifine puts its things and Iris puts its things, just the pipeline in general, we're also going to put our things in better places. So let's move these. We're going to cut. Let's start a new file, and we're going to paste those here. Why would we do this? Well, we might want these things to be accessible in more than one file, and if they're just in composite, we can only access them in composite. They won't work anywhere else. So to show this, we'll leave it here, and let's say we want to do a new define that's for our black sky we just made. Call it black sky. And this time we're going to just have it toggle on and off instead of having options. We could do this by just defining it like this, but something I like to do is give things numbers, with a 0 being off and a 1 being on, because then if I want to make more options later, I can make other versions with the 0 being off, 1 being the first version, 2 being the second version, and I don't have to change as much code. So define black sky with a default of 0, and we'll give it the options of 0 and 1. And again, there's no spaces in the beginning and end of these brackets. That's an important thing to do. So let's define black sky here in our composite. And then if we go back to sky where we were, we're going to make it so that the black sky only works when we've chosen that option. So if we copy black sky and go in here, how would we use this? Before we used these defines as text replacement, where it just kind of put the number in as what it is. But here we're going to do something different and make a decision with it. The same way that this is doing an if something, do this area, and else do this, we're going to make another if. This if we're going to start with the pound sign or hashtag, whatever you want to call it, with an if attached to it. And then we're going to say if black sky equals 1. Here, a thing that's important to know is this equal is 2 equals stuck together. We use 1 equal when we're making something equal. We use 2 equals when we're trying to ask if it's equal. So if black sky is equal to 1, do this. And we have to put an end if on the bottom of this, or it's going to glitch out. Let's see how it glitches out. It's probably going to be something that we can't debug easily. Okay, extraneous output, end of file, expecting blah blah blah. This is what you get when you have an if that opens, either like this or like this, and you don't have another bracket to close it. Since this is brackets opening and closing, and this is a pound sign opening, we're going to use the pound sign or hashtag to close it, and do end if. These are the two types of ifs we have. An if with parentheses and a bracket, and then a number sign with an if with a number sign end if. And since we're learning where things go and where things should be, we're going to go in the front of this line and hit tab to space it in, which is a good practice because it reminds us that the stuff here is inside of something and we have to come back out. And then that way it's easy to tell that we come back out to the base here. So if we had something here and we wanted to put another if, we'd go in again just to give us a visual reminder that we're in deep and we need to come back out. So now that we have if black sky equals 1, do this and whatever, let's save and see what happens. And let's make sure that we've turned our, in composite, let's turn black sky to 1. Because let's say we just want to default it that way. If we come back here and turn it on, we don't have a black sky anymore. Now why is that? It's because of where things are. Every file is separate, and what happens here, like, the sky has no idea about it. Now, normally we could just take this and put it in sky, like we have these here, but that can be a bad decision because we might have certain things that we want to affect multiple files. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a file that holds things for us that we can then put in all the other files without having to copy paste it into all of them. The reason we don't want to just copy paste this here and then copy paste it here and copy paste it somewhere else is then if we decide to add an extra option here, it's going to break everything because in one place it'll have one option, in one place it'll have 2. And also if we do this with code, like if we were to put this in a file that's for color attachments or for making color adjustments, if we change it in one place, we'd have to change it in every place. And that's a great way to just mess things up and get lost. So we're going to avoid that. So we're going to take a new file, and we're putting our defines in there that are our options. And we're going to do save as, and inside of a tutorial 2 in shaders, we're going to save it as all types, and we're going to save this as settings, since this is going to have all of our settings, and do .glsl, which that's the language we're programming in, is glsl, or gl, and that's the name of the file. So we're going to save that. Here we go. Now that's in a different place, and our composite isn't going to work anymore without that stuff. So we need to tell it that this stuff is here. To do that, we're going to include it. Include is like define, whereas define does text replacement and turns everywhere it says blue amount to 0, and include will take it and just insert the entire file in that spot. So we're going to include, and since this is with a number sign, it's something that is done as the code is being compiled, kind of. It's called like a directive or like a pre-compiler directive or whatever you want to call it. But it's just something that's done before the code runs. And let's see if I remember how to do this. We'll do slash and we'll do settings.glsl. That might not be right. There might have to be like a colon or something. Let's find out. Let's do that, save it, get back in here, reload, and let's oh, our shader pack settings aren't opening, so we must have messed something up. So let's look at a shader that works. Let's see. Oops, that's a zip file, so that's not going to work. And you don't need to do this because I'm just going to see the things. Okay, here we go. There's a space and there's big things. So in our composite, we're going to do include, starting with the number sign, a space, quotations, a slash, settings.glsl, and we're going to close it off. Let's save that. Get back in here. Refresh it. Okay, shader's reloaded. Let's check out our options. Here we go. We're back to normal. We can do grayscale. Our shader is working. Cool. So now that we've got options in one place, we know where they are and they'll be easy to find and easy to edit. And we can also, without having to copy them and worry if they're in every folder or every file, we can just put this here, right there. And then that gives us all of our settings. And whenever we add new ones in that file, they'll automatically be updated here. So now we've got down here in main, in our sky basic, that if black sky equals 1, color should be 0. Make sure we've saved. Let's go back in Minecraft, open it back up, and there we've got our black sky. So cool, we know what the sky basic is, and we made a change in it. That's all we're going to do with the sky for now. And we learned about ifs a little bit. We learned about these ifs anyway. Let's look at this if real quick too and kind of figure this out, because this is another part of where things are, is these brackets. We said here that in a function this opens it and closes it, and something important about that is just like we had to put these settings inside of this file for it to know where they are, we also have to put variables inside of places for the program to know where they are. So star data, or let's say color in main, it exists here. This is where we define it, so we can see it below this. If we go up here, that color is inside of a quote, isn't the same, so it doesn't matter. Star data here, we don't have this defined inside of main. So why can we see it and do things to it? Because it's defined here outside of main. And the way it works is everything that exists inside of brackets exists inside of all the other brackets that are smaller and further to the right, basically. So if we declare something outside of main, that's called a global variable, and it exists for the whole file. If we declare something inside of a function, that's called a local variable, and it only exists inside of that function. So here inside of this function called calculate sky color, we have a float, which is a decimal called up dot, and that's only going to exist inside of this function. We can also, if we want to confuse ourselves, take something like color and have one in here called color, and what we do to that won't affect this, because this color only exists inside of here, and that one would only exist inside of there. Where we put things is very important, and to avoid confusion, you generally want to put things not out here in global, but only inside of the function where you want to use it. We can also do things just inside of parentheses, not parentheses, brackets, and they will only exist in that bracket. For example, if we make vec3 color 2, and we have that be a vec3, let's just make it red, so it's 1 red, 0 yellow, 0 blue, That exists there inside of those brackets, and that's all it does. This should be correct, and it's not really doing anything with it, so it doesn't break our shader in any way. Let's turn our black and white off, because we're going to do something fun with this, just to check it. And look, we don't have an option for our black sky, so we'll have to put that in a minute too. Let's try to use color 2 outside of these brackets where it exists, and we'll have color turn into color 2. I'm going to just paste this here, end it with a semicolon, and then just put comment here on the end. This is a nice little trick if you want to save something to use for later, like we did earlier in the other file. We can just comment that out, and just like a comment on its own line isn't read by the computer, a comment at the end of a line also isn't read by the computer. So we're going to turn color to color 2, and let's see what happens here. Okay, we've got an error, and it's given us all kinds of information here. We know what it is though. What it is that this variable doesn't exist outside of this bracket, so we can't do anything here. So instead, let's put it outside the brackets so that it's in the same space as what we're doing here. Again, it can go deeper, but it can't come back out. So let's save that, go back in here and reload it, and there we go. Now our sky is red. So where we put things is very important. Now something else about these scopes is where you declare it, like where you declare this here, is important, but you can still do things to it inside of an if or inside of a bracket, and those changes will come back out. So if we have it turn blue here, so that's red, green, blue, blue 1, blue. Oh, not that. Let's see, we're going to do color 2 equals that, and we're ending with our semicolon. And then come back over here and refresh. The change goes through, but the variable itself only exists where it's put. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that. We're going to get rid of this, and just keep our black sky. And since we want our, and let's turn that back to actually be black. And since we want this to be an option that we can control, we've already got our setting for it. We're going to open up shaders.properties. We're going to give it a slider, and we're going to put it on the screen. So let's save that, and let's see if that works. We'll reload our shader. Looks like I maybe didn't save a file. Sky Basic. That little star means we didn't save it. So let's save it. Go back to Minecraft, reload. Here's our black sky. If we go to our options, we now have an option. And we gave it a slider, but it probably doesn't need one. Let's go back into shader properties and take it off the slider area. We'll just delete that there. And see what one looks like when it doesn't have a slider. Let's go back here and get escape to the front, reload, go into our shader pack settings. Here's black sky, and now when we click it, it just toggles, which is good enough because we only have one option. So if we put it to 0, it's this. If we put it to 1, it's black. Cool, so we've got our black sky. We can make a nice little spooky thing. I think I'm going to default it off. So we're using 0 for off. Let's save that. So that having spooky stuff will be a choice someone could make. And our shader isn't spooky if someone doesn't want it to be. So we found out where sky is. Now let's do something very similar to another file, because we want to know where things are. I'm going to check my time real quick if this tells me. It doesn't seem like it does. So since we have these things open, we can just open in here and see other files. So the other one we talked about was sky textured. Let's open up that fragment shader. And this one looks a little simpler. The reason for that is it's not doing anything custom really. We've got our version 120. Uniform is information that's either from Minecraft or just outside of this file. We're taking a sampler 2D called texture. So we're getting a texture from somewhere. And it's got some of these varyings that are coming from the vertex shader that we're not worrying about yet. And then in our main here, it's saying the color. Maybe remember this, it's loading a 2D texture from texture at text chord, and then it's multiplying it by something here. We don't know what that is doing, and we're not going to worry about it exactly right now. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to add the option to do more spooky stuff, and we're going to have an option to make the sun and the moon be red, so it matches. So we're going to do another if, and the reason we're doing these ifs with the number signs instead of the other if is that graphics cards are good at doing the same thing a lot of times, but if you make a lot of ifs with the brackets, it's got to make a decision of which way to go, and that can slow it down. But these ones with the number sign are decided before the program is like compiled and running, so it's not something it has to think about while it's running. It's just something it thinks about while it's doing the includes and all the text replacement, and doesn't have to think about it while it's going. So we're going to use these as often as we can. So let's make an option called red sun, and we want this to only run if it is equal to 1, so we have 2 equals. And before we do anything else, we're going to do our little number sign and close this with an end if. We're going to use tab and backspace to get that all lined up, and then inside of it we'll tab, and in here we want to say color, and we're going to have our color equal red, so that's a vec3. That would be 1 red, 0 yellow, 0 blue, and that should work. Now we need red sun to actually be an option, so let's save this, go into our settings, let's go down a line, we'll just paste this so we've got it. We'll just copy this one here because it's going to be the same format, and we'll copy paste red sun into it. So now we have a setting, and then we need to put the setting on our screen. We don't need a slider, but we'll put it on our screen here, red sun. So let's see if this works. Let's go back in our game, refresh, and let's go in our options. Let's turn on our black sky and apply it. That still works. Turn on our red sun. Let's see if that works. Let's look for where the sun is. It doesn't seem to work. So let's go back over here. Sky textured. Let's forget what we did wrong. So if red sun is equal to 1, the color should be red. And we did that inside of sky textured, which I believe does the sun and the moon. Just to see if we made a mistake with red sun being a thing, we're going to delete that and let this just be out in the same spot. And let's see if this does anything. I'm going to reload. Now we have an error. So what did we mess up? Apparently it was something that was hidden inside of there. So let's look at what's going on here and see what we might have done wrong. First of all, it seems like we were not actually inside of red sun, because the code only broke when we took that out of that, and then it's broken now. So let's see why it's broken, and then we'll put it back in. So we have color turning into a vec3 that's red. Why would that be a problem? Well, we're doing color as a vec3, but here color is a vec4. So we need to add that 4th component. So we can either have color be a vec4 and add another thing on here, or what we can do, because we might want to respect what the alpha value is, because that chooses where something is solid and where it isn't, is the alpha, like where it's transparent. We want to just change the red, green, and blue. So let's take our color and we'll do the red, green, blue to just do those aspects and have those changed to a vec3. That's 1, 0, 0. Let's save this and see if it works. Cool. Now our sun is red, but it's kind of bigger than it should be. So it must be doing something funny. So let's look at this again and think what might be going wrong. So the color is loading this texture, which is a red, green, blue, and an alpha, and then we're turning the colors to red. So the problem here might be that we're not doing anything with the alpha. So let's say that if the alpha is 0, like there's nothing there, that we should get rid of it. So let's say if, and we're going to do our little parentheses, and then we're going to have our little bracket here of what happens if this if comes true. We're going to say if our color dot alpha equals 0, and we're using decimals because vecs have floats inside of them, so the decimals. Then what should we do? We're going to use this command called discard, which just gets rid of this pixel and doesn't do anything with it. Let's see what this does. Okay, doesn't look like it did anything. Now, this might be a little bit confusing, but I'll tell you why it's probably happening. Floats are called floats for a reason, and that's because the number is kind of floaty. It's like something on top of water. You know about where it is, but it might be kind of jiggled up and down a little bit. That's the way that floats work. So you can't really always do an equal to compare them. Even if it's supposed to be 0, it might not look like it, because it might be 0.00001, might be 0.00002, it might just be a little bit off. So instead of checking if it equals 0, we're going to say if it's less than or equal to 0.01. And let's see if that does anything. It did not. So we apparently have another thing going on here. There's a problem with this. I'm going to have to think about that because I don't actually recall what this problem might be. Maybe we should only put this inside of if the alpha is greater than 0.001. Maybe that will work for us in this instance with our limited knowledge and memory. It did not. So if we go here and comment this out, the sun is regular. If we do this, we're turning it red. But we only want to do this if we are having the red sun option be 1 instead of 0. So let's go back to sky textured, and we're going to say if red sun equals 1, do this stuff. So here's our end if. We can save it. We can go here and reload. So this sun isn't red. Interesting. Why isn't that still working? It's because of where things are. We forgot to include our settings here. So let's go into our Sky Basic where we have our include, and we're going to copy that and put it in Sky Textured. Just anywhere after version 120 is fine. That has to be the first thing. So let's save this, go back in Minecraft, reload, and the red sun, if we turn it on, it works, and we could also turn it off. I don't know exactly why it's not working exactly how we want, so this is our first bug that's consistent in our shader. This doesn't behave how we want it to, and we don't know why. So we're going to have to do some learning and come back to that. But in the meantime, it's a good thing that we've got it behind a setting. It doesn't happen automatically, and that setting is defaulted off, which means the bug doesn't just infest the whole shader. It's kind of a choice to turn it on. But let's make that choice to turn it on, because we're just going with this theme of our spooky shader. So the next thing we're going to look at, we already did the sky, the sun, is let's look at clouds. So let's open up another folder file, and let's see what we've got. We're looking for G buffers because it's drawing things, not full screen. And I think there's one called clouds. Here we go. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add our settings to it, so we can copy that from another file. Here we go. Just so we've got our settings available, and we can do stuff with this. So just to check if we're in the right spot, let's say color equals, and again this is a vec4 here, so we'll say color.rgb equals, and let's turn the clouds, let's turn them green. That's kind of scary. So 0 red, 1 green, 0 blue. Let's close that and let's see what happens. Oops, I opened a new thing there. We'll save it, go in here, reload, and something is invalid. So let's look at what changes we made. Okay, I have a typo and we did not turn that into a vec3. That's not too bad. Let's see if it works now. There we go. Okay, so our clouds turned green when we wanted them to. So we know where the clouds folder is and we can do stuff in there. Cool. Since that might be spooky, let's make this an option and we'll save it. So we'll do the if, and we'll call this green clouds, this option. Remember, every time you want to make an if, you immediately want to close it so that we don't leave things hanging, because the error codes you get from that don't tell you what line it's on a lot of times. It doesn't know. It just knows that at the end things didn't work out right. So inside of that we'll do our tab, put our thing, and this is if green clouds equal to 1. And again, there's other ways you could just define it, but we're going to use the 0 and 1 way so that we can maybe make another version of green clouds later that respects shading and stuff. So we have we need to make a setting. So we're going to just copy what we've got there. Again, it's defaulted off because most people probably don't want green clouds. Save that. And then in our shader properties, we're going to add it to the screen. Save it. And then if we go back in here and reload, see the clouds are regular again. But if we go into our options, we now have the option to toggle them. Cool. So you can kind of see where this is going. We're just learning what these files are and a quick way to just make a change to show that we did something. So let's look at the terrain one. This is another thing we're doing, is after we draw that, we're going to draw terrain. Now, terrain is a solid thing, so we're going to, like I said, we draw the solid things, which would be terrain. And then textured is like particles. See, weather is rain and snow. What else do we have here? Hand is stuff in your hand. Entities is like sheep and monsters. We already looked at clouds. Basic is, I think that's more textures. Armor glint does armor glint. There's one for the beacon beam. So let's go to terrain and we'll just see that this works and then move on. Now this file looks more complicated already because it's got stuff going on from the tutorial. It looks like it's using a setting called colored shadows. It's using a setting called shadow brightness, and these are just in this file. Like I said, we're going to put all ours in a separate thing, so we've got them all in one place. But this one knows that these are only going to be used right here, so they're just used right here. It's got different uniforms. It's using different textures. It's using a light map, shadow color, shadow text, and texture. We're used to texture. It's got varyings. These are global variables that are coming from the vertex shader. It's got some constant variables. Constant variables are things that when they're set, they can't be changed later. So these are just set to what they are. They're including another file, so we can check that out later. And then here's our main. And you see it's doing stuff. It's got a color that it loads. It's multiplying it by that thing again. It's doing something here. And then it's got stuff that happens if shadow position is whatever. And if we take that bracket, now here we've got another reason that it's good to use indentations, is sometimes things kind of break the brackets, like the way they light up orange. That's not lining up in this case, because sometimes when you've got other ifs and stuff, it can kind of break how the brackets work with the program knowing where they are, the Notepad. And that's why it's important to use tab to go in and come back out so we can tell. And like we were doing, we were putting it down here. Whatever you do it, you just want to do it consistently. So that we can tell where it goes in and where it comes back out. So you can see that that one with this line comes back out, and it would be here, even though it doesn't line up, and then the program would still land right there. But this is the color doing stuff. This is all lighting stuff. We'll do this in another episode. But just to see if we're in the right place, we're going to say color.vec3, no color.rgb equals vec3. And let's turn all the ground yellow just to see that we're in the right place. So 0, actually yellow is red and green, so it's 1 red, 1 green, 0 blue. And we're going to put on here that this is a debug thing and a comment, just so we know to delete that line. Save it, go back to Minecraft. Up, and we made a mistake. Let's see what we did. We had a typo again. It's a vec3 we're turning it into. So we'll fix that. Reload. Okay, there we go. A very ugly, spooky shader. But what this means is we know where that file is and what it's doing. So let's delete our debug line, and we'll learn about all this later. Let's open up one more thing we talked about, which was entities. And here it's doing a lot of the same code that's in terrain, which is good that this works. Like, you can just kind of copy paste because you want them to be the same usually. You see, it looks like there's a little bit of a difference, but there's a lot of the same code. You generally don't want to write the same code in more than one place, because then if you change something, you've got to change it in all the places, and you might forget to, and things get lost. But for something simple, this was good. Let's go in here. We're in our gbuffer entities, and let's say color.rgb equals, and we'll turn them red, so a vec3 of 1, 0, 0, semicolon. Again, we'll flag this as debug because we want to delete this later and know which line to delete. Save, go back in here, reload, and let's look for an entity. There's a sheep or something, and it's bright red. It's a cow, actually. You know what? This makes me think of something. Instead of this just being for a test, this might be good for someone who has bad vision. Let's say we've got a friend who wants to play Minecraft, but they can't really tell what's going on too great because their vision isn't that good, and they die a lot. So it'd be nice for them if maybe everything was black and white except for enemies. If we try to do this with our code right now, it doesn't work though, because we're just turning everything black and white in the end. So let's try to make this have a purpose. Let's make this a thing where we can have enemies be red and everything else be black and white. So let's make an option called, let's see, red enemies. Red entities, we'll say, because we're not separating them out yet. And we want to do this only if red entities is 1. We're going to change the color. Just put a little tab in so we know where it is. And then we're going to make this an option. So let's save this. We don't have our settings loaded in this, so we're going to have to do that. But first, let's put this in the other places it needs to go. We're going to paste it here. And we're going to save that. And then we're also going to, in shader properties, add it to the screen, paste it there. There we go. And now we have to remember that we need to copy our include that actually loads the settings into our entities file. So we'll put that right here. There we go. And now this should hopefully be an option that we can toggle on and off. We can't tell when we have the grayscale on right now though, because the grayscale is happening in our composite, and the composite happens after all the gbuffers. So let's do that. Let's turn on red entities. That works. But we are not grayscaling just the terrain. We're grayscaling everything in composite. So let's change that. What we could do is we could go into our composite and we could just copy this code for grayscale. But then we've got the same code in multiple places. And again, that's not a great idea. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to make another include file. So let's make a new file. And this is going to be our color adjustments. Let's make a comment for ourselves so we know what this file is. And we'll enter and go down. And to start, let's take what we had already inside our composite, which was a make green. Let's cut that out of there. And we'll save this so we don't forget to. Let's go into our new one. And we'll paste this function here. And we're going to save this as... So here we go. What do we want to save it as and where do we want to put it? In our shaders, there's so many files and it's already a cluttered mess. So where are we going to put this? We don't want to put it in a big cluttered mess. So we're going to make a new folder. where we put things that we use in other files. In programming, those are usually called libraries. So we're going to call this lib for library, and we're going to save it in there. And we're going to call this color add adjustments .glsl. And we're in all types, save, that's here. Now since we just broke our other file, we need to make sure that we're including this to kind of put the code back. So let's go somewhere where we have our include, and we're just going to copy that. And we're going to paste it and change this to be lib color add adjustments. Now if we have broken includes, stuff just breaks and doesn't work. So let's make sure that this works before we do anything else. Okay, that still works. Let's make sure that the, what was it, make a green that was in there? Okay, that still works. So now that we've got color adjustments as its own thing, we can include that in multiple files. But first we're going to take our make green, and we're going to make our grayscale be a function that's on its own instead of just being stuck inside of composite. But let's see what we were doing. We were doing this stuff right here. So we're going to copy that and go into color adjustments and do that right here. Actually, let's get in here, and for our own brain we're going to put a little blank comment just to give us a space, paste our new code next to the old code so we can kind of make sure that we're doing what we need to. So before, to make something green, we were doing that to it. This up here is how we make something grayscale. So let's make sure we're taking in a color. So we're using a color. We've got an amount. Okay, that amount isn't in this formula. And then we return a color. We still want to return a color. We don't want to turn things green. So let's get rid of that. We do want to do this. We want to mix to what gray amount? Do we want to do one that goes into the function, or do we want to use our standard one? Well, let's use our, let's use amount, and then we have more control and could use this in multiple places, not just in a place that uses that gray amount variable. So now when we call this function, which we're going to call make gray, it will take in a color and an amount, and then it will determine the average color, mix the color with the average color according to that amount, and return the new color. So let's save that, and now we have make gray. To make sure that this new function we have works, let's go here and replace the code we had with the function. So we're going to comment out the other stuff we had, and we're going to have it work just like make green. We'll have color equals make gray, color and amount, and the amount we want to use is the gray amount that we have a setting for. And let's make sure that this all works before we go adding it somewhere else too. Let's go back in Minecraft, reload. It loaded, that's good, so nothing is terribly broken. And if we turn grayscale numbers, cool, that works. So now we have functions for color adjustments in their own file where they're not cluttered, and we can access them in multiple places. So if we go into our composite and copy color adjustments, we can also put these in terrain. So let's go to terrain, and we're going to have to add this include up here in our version. Now we don't have our settings loaded here, so let's also load our settings. We'll copy those. And we're going to put our settings first because that setting information is needed in the color adjustments. And then now we should be able to take our grayscale code here, and let's clean this up. So we'll do that. And we should be able to take this code, and it should also run here. Now we want it to run last for the terrain, so we'll put it right here. And instead of this going to the gray amount that covers the whole screen, let's have this change according to a terrain gray amount, a new thing that we'll make. So let's put that there. We'll save this, add it to our settings, and we'll give it this format where we can choose how much it has. Save this, and then we're going to put it in shader.properties, and we want this to have a slider since it has an amount. So we'll give it a slider, and we'll put it on screen, save it, and then let's go back in Minecraft, load in, and we've got something broken. So we're going to have to figure out what this is. We probably know what it is because we didn't change too many things, but we can copy this error, and again do File, New, right-click, Paste, go to the top, see what's going on. There's something wrong in terrain solid, it's invalid, and I don't know what's going on there. So let's look, and we know what we just changed. So let's look at what we just changed. So we just changed color to equal this, and here's what our problem is color here again is a vec4, and this outputs a vec3. So we're going to do color.rgb equals this, because remember, make gray outputs a vec3. So let's save that and see if that fixes it. Reload. Nope, we've still got a problem. So let's make sure that that line is what's breaking it. Let's comment that out and save it. Let's reload. Okay, the shader works without that line. So we know that this line is breaking it. So why would this line break it? Let's step through it once at a time and see what the problem might be. This is an important part of debugging. So let's just test the concept that we're changing color.rgb to another vec3. So let's change it to just pure white, and we'll comment out the rest of this line. And let's save that and see if the terrain turns white without breaking. So we go back in here, reload it, and something broke. So right there we know that that line itself is just a bad concept. So let's look at it and see what's going on. Here we've got a typo, so we'll fix that. We'll try again. Okay, so the concept works, that we can change the vec3 RGB to that. So the error must be in the second part of it. So we're changing it to make gray based on color and that. So here's our problem again. Color is a vec4 here, but inside of make gray, it wants to take in a vec3 called color. So let's go back to terrain and make sure that we're only sending in the red, green, and blue. And let's save this and see if this does it. Okay, it didn't break. That's a good sign. It actually loaded the shader. So let's check our terrain gray amount and let's put that up to 1. Cool. Now we have black and white with just red enemies. So now our friend who can't really see that well will have a much easier time playing Minecraft. That's actually really cool, isn't it? So not only can we make the shader spooky, but we can actually make it more fun for somebody who couldn't play it before. That makes me want to cry a little bit, because that's just something sweet to do. So I think I've probably made this video way too long, but we've done some cool stuff with this. So let's look at what we did real quick to kind of overview. We learned the order that things draw, and we learned what a lot of these files do, that first it draws the shadows, and then it draws all the G buffers, which is where it draws things, and then it does the composite, which is the full screen pass. And we learned that we could change sky basic, sky textured is the sun and the moon, there's clouds, and then it draws the solid stuff, which is terrain and entities, and then it would also be your hand. And then after that, it would draw things we didn't get to, which would be, let's see, the weather, and there's water somewhere. Where's GBuffer's water? I actually don't see it, which is interesting. I might just be missing it. But then afterwards, it would draw GBuffer's water, and there's also a GBuffer's hand water to draw, because the water shader doesn't just do water, it does anything that isn't perfectly solid and opaque, draws anything that's transparent like glass too, because they kind of want to render the same way. So today we learned all of that, and we added more settings and made them actually have a purpose. let's turn off our red sun and our black sky and just use our accessibility feature we made. The gray terrain and the red enemies. Actually, that's kind of funny with the blue sky, but that's a mood, I guess. We could be in this mood. And that's going to be it for today. I hope you all had fun learning about making shaders. And next time, we're going to look at maybe some more stuff about how to separate out which entities. Because maybe we want the cows to be green since they're good, and just creepers to be red since they're bad. Or maybe we want to get into shading and how to actually do some different shading on stuff. There's lots of options of stuff to do. I think this was good for today. I hope you all had fun, and I'll talk to you soon.